Hey everybody, welcome to the episode. Today I'm going to try something new. I'm going to be having a chat with a friend here, my friend Chat GPT. We're going to be chatting about Marzano's 6 steps to vocabulary development. I've been watching the show Peaky Blinders. I don't know if anybody's ever watched that, but it inspired the voice today behind our friend ChatGPT. So ChatGPT, would you like to say hello?
All right there, Dave. Sounds like a brilliant setup for our chat. Hello to everyone tuning in. I'm ChatGPT, ready to dive into Marzano's 6 steps to vocabulary development. Let's get started, shall we?
Yeah, I think, before we start, I would like to first make you aware that the the environment that we work in, it's a elementary school. It's a dual language campus between Spanish and English, but we also have ESL classrooms that are monolingual. So I want you to keep that in mind as we're discussing uh, Marsano's vocabulary development.
Got it, Dave. With a dual language campus and ESL classrooms in mind, we'll focus on how Marzano's steps can be adapted to support vocabulary development for both bilingual and monolingual students. Shall we dive into the first step?
No, I'm not really ready to get to the steps yet. First, can you help me understand why is Marsano's work important?
Absolutely. Understanding the significance of Marzano's work is a great place to start. Robert Marzano is a prominent educational researcher who has contributed significantly to our understanding of effective teaching strategies. His 6 steps to vocabulary development are important because they provide a structured approach to teaching vocabulary, which is crucial for comprehension and learning across all subjects. This is especially vital in a dual language setting where students are navigating vocabulary in more than one language. Marzano's approach helps teachers create a consistent, research-backed method for vocabulary instruction, enhancing students' language acquisition and academic success.
What were some of the research findings that he found about academic achievement and vocabulary knowledge?
Marzano found a strong correlation between vocabulary knowledge and academic achievement. His research indicated that direct vocabulary instruction can significantly enhance students' understanding of academic subjects. This is because a robust vocabulary allows students to access and engage with complex texts and concepts across the curriculum. Marzano's work emphasizes that vocabulary instruction is not just about learning definitions, but about understanding how words function within different contexts, which in turn supports critical thinking and problem solving skills. In multilingual settings, such as
Can I
yours,
stop
this
you for? I want to stop you for a second because I remember reading something that they found somehow they were able to measure vocabulary sizes of young children and how the size of their vocabulary impacted their academic achievement. Am I remembering incorrectly?
you're remembering correctly. Studies have shown that vocabulary size in young children is a strong predictor of their future academic achievement. Children with a larger vocabulary tend to perform better in reading comprehension and overall literacy, which are foundational for learning in other areas. This connection is partly why vocabulary instruction is emphasized in early education. A robust vocabulary helps children access more complex texts and ideas, contributing to their success across subjects. In multilingual settings, building a strong vocabulary in both languages can provide students with a significant advantage in their overall academic journey.
What are, I'm just curious, how do you even measure the vocabulary size of a student in elementary school?
Measuring vocabulary size in elementary school students can be done through various methods, each providing insights into different aspects of vocabulary knowledge. Here are a few common approaches. 1. Standardized tests. These tests often include vocabulary sections where students are asked to identify synonyms, antonyms, or meanings of words in context. 2. Word lists. Teachers might use grade level word lists to assess which words students know. Students might be asked to provide definitions or use words in sentences. 3. Observational assessments. Teachers observe students' language use in class discussions, writings, and readings to gauge their vocabulary usage and understanding in context. 4. Oral language assessments. These involve conversations or interviews where students are prompted to use specific vocabulary words, allowing teachers to assess their active vocabulary. 5. Vocabulary quizzes. Regular quizzes on recently taught vocabulary help track retention and understanding over time.
Okay.
Each method has its
Okay. Um, so as I was listening to you talk, I was just thinking for our purposes here, for us to gauge whether or not students had actually learned, but I would like to use the word acquired because I think it carries a different definition than learned, and we can talk about that later in this conversation. But maybe would be to give a list of the words that will be a focal point for the learning, the academic learning at the beginning, like a pre-test, and then have a post-test, and students are able to either write about those words, draw about those words. What are some other ideas in order to be able to do a pre and post-test way students can give output to show comprehension of the terms?
I like your focus on acquired vocabulary, which implies a deeper, more integrated understanding. A pre-test and post-test approach is a great way to measure this. Here are some ideas for varied outputs. 1. Written reflections. Have students write sentences or short paragraphs using the target words, showing their grasp of meaning and context. 2. Visual presentations. Encourage students to draw pictures or diagrams that illustrate the meaning of the words. This is particularly effective for younger students. 3. Oral presentations. Have students explain the words' meanings or use them in a story. This can be done individually or in groups to promote collaborative learning. 4. Peer teaching. Let students teach each other the words' meanings, which reinforces their understanding. 5. Games and activities. Incorporate words into classroom games, like vocabulary bingo or charades, to make learning fun and interactive. 6. Concept mapping. Have students create mind maps connecting the new vocabulary to related words, relationships, and uses. By incorporating a
Could
variety of
you
output.
could you do the mind mapping with visuals, let's say, and the target words to mind map visuals with words?
Absolutely. Using visuals alongside the target words in mind mapping can be very effective. Here's how you might do it. Center image. Start with a central image that represents the main topic or category of the vocabulary words. For example, if the words are related to ecosystems, you might use an image of a forest or ocean. Branching out. Create branches from the central image, each with a visual representing a subcategory or related concept. For instance, for ecosystems, branches could include plants, animals, and climate. Word associations. From each subcategory, draw lines to the target vocabulary words. Alongside each word, include a small image or icon that symbolizes its meaning. This visual association helps reinforce understanding. 4. Connections and examples. Encourage students to draw lines between words and images that are connected, adding examples or additional visuals to show relationships.
So this
5.
would be a good way for students that have lower levels of maybe the target language or the language of instruction proficiency to be able to show understanding of those terms, as well as for students who have more language, you could do things like the reflection or creating a story, things that may be a little more language intensive. That's what sounds like what you're saying to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By incorporating visuals into mind mapping, you provide a way for students with varying levels of language proficiency to engage meaningfully with the vocabulary.
All
Students
right.
will
Well,
learn expressions.
let's move on. And before we get to the steps of how Marsano is saying we learn language, I'd like to briefly ask you how you see Marsano playing into the distinction between learning language and acquiring language that Stephen Krashen clearly articulates is that we cannot learn language, that language has to be acquired. So I want that to kind of be in the backdrop of when we're talking about Marsano. What are your thoughts?
That's a great point, Dave. Stephen Krashen's distinction between language learning and language acquisition emphasizes that true language competence comes from natural, meaningful exposure and use, rather than formal instruction alone. Krashen argues that language acquisition is a subconscious process occurring through meaningful interaction in the target language, leading to true fluency. Marzano's approach, while more structured, can complement Krashen's theory by providing the necessary exposure and interaction with vocabulary in a meaningful context. While Marzano focuses on explicit vocabulary instruction, his methods can be used to create rich, engaging contexts for vocabulary use, facilitating acquisition. For
So
example,
we need to keep in mind that while we're going through the steps of Marsano, central to the ways we're going about this explicit instruction is integrating in as much as possible what Krashen would refer to as comprehensible input.
exactly, Dave. While following Marzano's steps, we should aim to incorporate Krashen's principle of comprehensible input. This means providing language input that is slightly above the student's current level, but still understandable with the help of context, visuals, and prior knowledge. By doing so, we create a language rich environment where students can naturally acquire vocabulary while engaging with the content. This integration of explicit instruction and natural acquisition strategies can be particularly powerful in a dual language or ESL classroom.
All right, can we go back to where we were? We were talking about introducing the first step of Marsano and what is the first step of that he recommends for language instruction?
Of course, let's revisit the first step of Marzano's approach. The initial step is to provide a description, explanation, or example of the new term. This involves introducing the new vocabulary word to students in a way that is accessible and engaging. Here's how you can do it. Student friendly explanation. Begin with a simple, clear definition or explanation of the word. Avoid using complex language that might confuse students. Contextualize. Place the word in a context that is relevant to the student's experiences or prior knowledge. This could be through a story, an example, or a real life scenario.
Okay, so let's take something like I don't know, second grade science where they deal with like the word force, understanding of force is a push or a pull. So would you recommend that teachers like display this like on a PowerPoint show, on like an anchor chart, the word, and giving the definition? How would you recommend going about this?
For a concept like force in second grade science, I'd recommend a mix of visual aids and interactive elements to make the concept clear and engaging. Here's a step by step approach. 1. Anchor chart. Create an anchor chart with the word force at the top. Use large, bold letters for visibility. Include a simple definition, a push or a pull. 2. Visual representations. Add pictures of scenarios that demonstrate force, such as someone pushing a cart or pulling a wagon. These visuals help students connect the word to real life actions. 3. Interactive demonstration. Use a physical demonstration in class. Have a student push a light object, like a small box, and pull a toy with a string. This hands on activity helps solidify the concept. 4. Digital presentation. If you have access to technology, A PowerPoint slide with animation showing objects being pushed or pulled can be very effective. 5. Student interaction. Have students discuss examples of pushes and pulls they have seen or experienced. This encourages them to use the word force in context.
So what
By
I'm hearing
providing
what I'm hearing you say is you're not just introducing the word and giving like an oral definition. You're trying to help students make meaning out of this by having visuals or real life examples in this step one.
Exactly, Dave. The goal is to create a rich, meaningful introduction to the word that goes beyond just an oral definition. By using visuals, real life examples, and interactive elements, you help students connect with the word on multiple levels, making it more likely that they'll remember and understand it.
Okay, so let's go to what's step two.
Step two of Marzano's framework is to have students restate the explanation in their own words. This step encourages students to process the new information and make it their own, deepening their understanding. Here's how you can implement it. 1. Pair or group discussions. Have students turn to a partner or small group and discuss the word's meaning in their own words. This allows them to articulate their thoughts and hear others' perspectives. 2. Write exercise. Ask students to write a brief explanation or sentence using the word. This helps solidify their understanding through written expression. 3. Class discussion. Invite a few students to share their statements with the class. Discuss any variations and clarify as needed. 4.
So so
Visual aid.
um, so what I hear you as the role of the teacher here would be to provide the structure of grouping, whether or not they were doing a pair or a table group, provide the structure of a certain amount of time, maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and then the structure of hearing from some of the groups, also giving students some way to write this down, whether it be in a journal, on a whiteboard. Um, that's what I hear is the teacher's role during this time.
You've got it, Dave. The teacher's role is to facilitate this process by providing clear instructions, managing time, and creating opportunities for students to engage with the word and express their understanding. By providing structure and support, teachers help students actively process the vocabulary.
Okay, but what about if students are just really way off target with the meaning of the word? Is this where what would you recommend as far as the teacher to help redirect the student? Maybe redirect them to the visuals, ask them if their definition or their description matches the visuals. What would be a recommendation?
That's a common situation, and your instinct is right. Here are some strategies for redirecting students who might be off target. 1. Refer back to visuals. Guide students to look at the visual representations again. Ask them questions like, does your explanation fit with what we see in this picture? This helps them self-correct by relating their understanding to the visuals. Ask guiding questions. Use questions to lead students to the correct meaning. For example, what happens when you push something? Can you see a similar action in our pictures? 3. Peer sharing. Have students share their explanations with a partner. Peer discussions can often clarify misunderstandings. 4. Clarify and rephrase. If several students are confused, it might help to rephrase the explanation or provide another example. Sometimes a different wording can make a big difference. 5. Use simple language. Simplify the language you use to explain the concept, ensuring it's age appropriate and easy to grasp.
Okay, so it sounds like step one, we need to introduce the word, maybe use an anchor chart or a digital display, also scaffolded by pictures and maybe a real interaction or a demonstration of whatever the word might represent, if possible. And then the second step then is for students to talk with their partners about a description of the word that they come up with, and then the teacher is checking in with those students. Is that correct? And if so, let's move on to step three.
Yes, that's a great summary. Now, moving on to step three, create a visual representation. In this step, students create their own visual representations of the word. This could be a drawing, a symbol, or any kind of graphic that helps them connect the word to its meaning. Here's how to guide this process. Model examples. Show examples of visual representations for other words to inspire students. Explain how these visuals link to the word's meanings. 2. Encourage creativity. Allow students to be creative in how they represent the word. Some might prefer detailed drawings, while others might opt for simple symbols. 3. Connect to meaning. Remind students that the goal is to create a visual that helps them remember the word's meaning. Encourage them to think about how their picture relates to the concept. 4. Share and explain. Have students share their visuals with a partner or the class, explaining how their image represents the word. This reinforces their understanding and exposes them to different interpretations. This step allows students to process the word in a personal and creative way, making the vocabulary more memorable. It also caters to visual learning.
Are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Ready to continue whenever you are.
Okay, you stopped talking when you were saying it caters to visual learning, I think. Did you have anything else you wanted to say?
Sure, I was just mentioning that this step caters to visual learners and adds an element of creativity and fun to the learning process. It helps students form a personal connection with the vocabulary, making it more likely that they'll remember and understand the word. Shall we move on to step four?
Yeah, but my question is, I'd still like to come back to this distinction of acquiring language versus learning language because I think it's important. So it's not that we're trying to get students to memorize this meaning, right? We're trying to get them in some ways to experience and understand this word, right? I mean, help me try to articulate the difference between these two. What is it that we're trying to get after by doing this? Providing visuals, them giving their own description, drawing a picture. Like, help me articulate this.
Absolutely, Dave. What we're aiming for is more about language acquisition than just learning in the traditional sense.
Hmm.
When students acquire language, they internalize the meaning and use of words naturally through exposure and meaningful interaction. This goes beyond rote memorization to a deeper, more intuitive grasp of the language. By providing visuals, encouraging personal restatements, and creating visual representations, we're immersing students in the word's meaning and usage. This helps them form mental connections and associations, making the vocabulary part of their active language repertoire. This process mirrors how we naturally acquire our first language through context, usage, and interaction, rather than through isolated memorization. The goal is for students to not just know the definition of force, for example, but to intuitively understand and apply it in various contexts.
Yeah, that seems to make sense, and oftentimes is um, deviation away from what teachers normally feel like their job is to like it's almost like a different image to me. Instead of the teacher like saying, "Here's the knowledge that I have to give to you about what this word means," it's like and the students being passive about that. It's almost like in this process, the students are being part of a conversation in a way or part of an environment that is helping the student do the work to understand what's happening. So it's like a reversal of roles for me. I see this as the students doing most of the work to try to understand this, and the teacher sort of facilitating an environment where things are comprehensible or where things are going to be made understandable by the student, which is very different than assigning them a task of something to quote unquote learn.
Exactly, Dave. You've captured the essence of this approach. Instead of being the sole source of knowledge, the teacher becomes a facilitator, guiding students as they actively engage with and make sense of new vocabulary. This approach puts students at the center of the learning process, encouraging them to explore, question, and construct their own understanding. By creating an environment rich in comprehensible input and interactive learning opportunities, teachers help students internalize new words in a way that feels natural and meaningful. This shift from a teacher centered to a student centered approach is key in fostering language acquisition,
Mm.
as it mirrors the natural way we learn language through immersion and meaningful use.
Yeah, so it's like if we want language acquisition to happen in the classroom, it's what I hear you saying is we have to try to make things as natural as possible in the terms of acquisition of language, which means things have a meaningful context. Otherwise, you don't acquire anything, correct?
Exactly, you've got it. To foster language acquisition in the classroom, we need to create an environment where language is encountered in meaningful, relevant contexts. When students see the practical use and significance of words within their experiences or interests, they're more likely to internalize and retain them.
I think
This
where the
approach.
I think where the difficulty starts is once this, in this example is force is a little more easier to demonstrate, but then when you get into more abstract, maybe language arts, academic vocabulary, that might be literary devices or genre or internal character conflict. These types of things become a little more challenging. I don't want to get stuck on that, but I think it's an important point to consider. Okay, so then what I think we're on the fourth step. What would be the fourth step?
You're right. Abstract concepts do present more of a challenge, but the same principles of making them relatable and engaging still apply. Now, on to step 4. Engage in activities to add knowledge. This step involves using various activities to deepen students' understanding of the new vocabulary. Here are some ways to implement this step. 1. Word sorts. Have students sort words into categories, such as synonyms, antonyms, or by themes. This helps them see relationships between words. 2. Games. Incorporate vocabulary games like bingo, matching, or charades. Games make learning fun and reinforce vocabulary through repetition. Word maps. Expand on the visual representation by creating word maps that include definitions, synonyms, antonyms, and example sentences. Writing prompts. Encourage students to use the
Hmm,
new vocabulary in their writing, such as in a story or a descriptive paragraph.
I like that
5.
idea.
Discussions. Facilitate class or small group discussions where students can use the vocabulary in context, sharing their thoughts and ideas. These activities provide varied and repeated exposure to the vocabulary, helping to.
Okay, so providing more opportunities through different types of activities, whether it be writing, games, group discussions, to continue to use the word. Um, so at this point, the students should have good working knowledge, let's say, of the vocabulary, and they're just sort of continuing to try to use it.
Exactly. At this stage, students should have a solid understanding of the vocabulary, and these activities are about reinforcing that knowledge through continued use and exposure. The more students interact with the words in various contexts, the more likely they are to internalize and be able to use them effectively. It's all about moving from initial understanding to confident, active use. Shall we proceed to step
Yeah,
5?
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead with step 5.
Step 5 is discuss the terms with others. This step emphasizes the importance of social interaction in learning. By discussing the vocabulary terms with peers, students can deepen their understanding and refine their ideas. Here's how to incorporate this step. 1. Think, pair, share. Have students first think about the term individually, then discuss their thoughts with a partner, and finally share with the larger group. This structure encourages all students to participate. Group discussions. Organize small group discussions where students explore the term in more depth, share examples, and connect it to other concepts. Debates. For more advanced vocabulary.
During this step, maybe after the lesson, the teacher would need to develop some maybe little cards or some little prompts for students to discuss in groups, and then maybe those groups could rotate so that students were talking about different prompts. So I'm kind of seeing this step as something towards maybe the end of a lesson or the sort of engagement part or the practice part of a lesson.
Absolutely. This step fits well towards the end of a lesson or during the practice phase. Preparing cards or prompts with questions, scenarios, or problems related to the vocabulary can help structure these discussions. By rotating groups or prompts, you ensure that students are exposed to different aspects of the vocabulary and can practice using the terms in various contexts. This not only reinforces their understanding, but also helps them develop the ability to articulate their thoughts and ideas using the new vocabulary.
Okay, what about the last step, step 6?
The final step, step 6, is involve students in games. This step emphasizes the power of play in reinforcing vocabulary learning. Games provide a fun, low pressure way for students to engage with new words, increasing their retention and understanding. Here are some game ideas. 1. Vocabulary bingo. Create bingo cards with vocabulary words. As you call out definitions, students mark the corresponding word on their cards. Pictionary. Students draw pictures representing vocabulary words while their team guesses the word. Charades. Students act out vocabulary words without speaking, and their team tries to guess the word. Jeopardy. Create a Jeopardy style game with categories related to the vocabulary, challenging students to answer questions or define terms. Word SWOT. Write vocabulary words on the board, call out definitions, and have students swat the correct word with a fly swatter. Games like these make vocabulary practice enjoyable and dynamic, helping to solidify students' grasp of the terms through repetition and context. This step is a great way to conclude a lesson, leaving students with a positive and memorable experience.
So really you could design a whole lesson on force, let's say in second grade, and structure it around Marzano's 6 steps, and you would cover the content of understanding force by really trying to develop the vocabulary, right? So it seems to me that you're doing the content work as you're doing the vocabulary work.
Exactly, Dave. By structuring a lesson around Marzano's 6 steps, you're integrating vocabulary development with content learning. This approach ensures that as students build their vocabulary, they're simultaneously deepening their understanding of the concept of force. Through activities that promote engagement, interaction, and application, students are more likely to internalize the vocabulary and apply it in context, leading to a more comprehensive grasp of both the language and the content. It's an effective way to make vocabulary instruction a central part of content learning.
Okay, well, I appreciate you taking time to talk with us today about Marzano's 6 steps. We appreciate the information.
It was my pleasure, Dave. I'm glad we could dive into Marzano's 6 steps together. If you have any more questions or need further assistance, feel free to reach out. Take care.
All right. Cheers, mate.
Cheers, Dave. Take care.